Rengar has always been a popular champion, and with good reason. He's incredibly fun because whenever you get ahead on this oppressive champion, the enemy team will always feel helpless against you. But if you fall behind on Rengar, you're gonna be as oppressed yourself, since Rengar is a terrible champion to play from behind. Rengar is really a do-or-die kind of champion. Now, you would think that because of his all-or-nothing playstyle, there wouldn't be a lot of high elo Rengars because a lot of high elo players are really good at playing safe. But that's not the case. In fact, there are several high elo Rengars across all regions. So what are high elo players doing to make Rengar work in their games? And what can you do to be more effective with him in your own games? This is how to play like a challenger. Most traditional junglers like Rek'Sai and Elise do not always need their ultimate when ganking. That is not the case with Rengar. Because he has such lackluster ganks pre-level 6, Rengar players are forced mostly to stay in the jungle and farm. He doesn't really have any good reliable burst or CC. If you do actually decide to gank with Rengar before you get your ultimate, you cannot do so like regular junglers. Unless the enemy laner is insanely overextended, like pushed up to your turret, when you gank on Rengar pre-6, you're gonna need a bush to set up a full combo. When you see one of the enemy laners begin to push towards your side of the map, usually most of the time, they will eventually come over to the river brush to get a ward down for safety. Most junglers hit level 3 at around 245 and they are ready to gank and are level 3 at this point. During this time frame, all players want to instinctively get a ward down. You need to be in this brush when they place this ward. It is so important to do this because you need that extra stack of ferocity from your passive. If you don't get your 4th proc, you won't be able to use an empowered ability. This is pretty much the only real effective way to gank as Rengar before he hits his ultimate. But it takes a lot of patience to gank as Rengar effectively in the early game, and sometimes your laners are just not reliable bait. So most of the time, as a Rengar player, you should just be focusing on having a really good early game clear. Here are the possible jungle routes available to you as Rengar. The most farm-orientated route goes something like this. Go from red, to wolves, to blue, to Gromp, and then Scuttlecrab. Rengar's early ganks are really weak, so you mostly want to stick to your own jungle unless someone is overextended. After you clear these camps, you go back to base, buy Longsword plus Rejuve Bead, clear Raptors, Krugs, and then go back again. The reason this route is the most effective route is because of the rune Futures Market. If you take this route with Futures Market, you're able to purchase Tiamat right here. And once you buy Tiamat, by the time you go back up to the Wolves camp, it will have respawned. And once you've killed the Wolves camp, the Gromp will also have respawned. Provided you are not being counter-jungled in any way, this is the most efficient farming route for Rengar to take. You will be level 4 by the time you go back and buy Tiamat, and after you re-clear the second spawning of your jungle, you can hit level 6 before or at 7 minutes. Again, ganking on Rengar in the early game is extremely difficult without setup. If you do choose to gank a lane as Rengar, you need to rely on your teammates to bring the CC. Because Rengar is so easily kiteable in the early game, you mostly just want to stick to the jungle farming. Now let's talk about the most mechanical aspect about Rengar, his full combo. What is his full combo exactly? Rengar doesn't have mana or energy, his bar is filled with ferocity. Every ability he uses besides his ult generates 1 stack of ferocity. Leaping out of a bush at 0 ferocity also gets him 1 ferocity. At 4 stacks, your next ability becomes empowered and grants a movement speed buff. Empowered Q deals extra damage and increases attack speed. W does the exact same thing except it adds on a cleanse effect. And an empowered E will root someone in place instead of slowing them. So essentially, it's super important to get 4 stacks, and that's why you need bushes to be able to set up your combo. Otherwise, you're losing almost half of your damage. Knowing all this, the full combo of Rengar goes like this. At 0 ferocity, you will precast Q before you leap. Leap from either a brush or from the ult. E, then use your W while mid-air. When you land, cast your Tiamat. And from there, you will have used every single one of your damaging abilities, and you will have an empowered ability ready to use. If you're against someone that you need to catch out with your team, obviously use Bola. If you're against a champion that you need to burst out quickly, use your Q. Most of the time you don't want to use your Empower W, it's mostly useful as a cleanse. So the only instance where this would be useful is if you've overextended and you've gone too deep. Now let's talk about Rengar's mid game. One big mistake that Rengar players make a lot is they feel the pressure of wanting to gank as much as the enemy jungler. On Rengar, you just don't gank as effectively without your ultimate. Even though you hit level 6 and you have your ultimate, it still has a fairly long cooldown, especially in the mid game. You will still need a lot of setup and you still need to use bushes as bait in order to get effective ganks off. When you don't have your ultimate as Rengar, think of yourself as Garfield. Your only job at this point is to just laze back in your own jungle and eat all your jungle minions. Once your ulti comes back up, that's when you actually become a predator again. Rengar's mid game should mostly be played by using your ultimate to look for picks around the map and then pushing for objectives. Rengar's also very efficient in soloing Dragon because of his auto attack speed boosts and because his W gives him a lot of sustain against the Dragon. Remember, Rengar is a snowballing champion. That means when you get a lead, you're very oppressive, and when you fall behind, you're extremely weak. This means you don't want to give your opponents any kind of hope that they can kill you. But what do you actually do when you fall behind on Rengar? If you do actually fall behind on Rengar, you really only have two options. First is to repeatedly gank a single winning lane whenever you get the chance to do so. What I mean by winning lane is a lane that's already beating the other enemy laner 1v1 without your help. Even though that lane is already winning and he doesn't really need your help anymore, what you're essentially doing is you're drawing power from this winning lane to get yourself back into the game. And it also ensures that your singular winning lane isn't going to be turned around by the enemy jungler. Now, let's say you don't have any winning lanes. All your lanes are losing and you're pretty fucked. The only option you have at this point is pretty much just power farming. Power farm and get vision for your team. After you've power farmed throughout your entire jungle, if your ultimate is still not back up, just go grab vision for your laners. Getting vision down when you're behind will do two things for you. One, it helps prevent yourself from getting invaded. And two, it helps minimize the damage that the enemy jungler will do to your own team. All you can really do at this point when you fall behind as Rengar is just constantly be watching the map and warning your laners about the enemy jungler. If you need help to figure out whether or not you're placing enough vision for your team, you can use the Mobalytics app to compare yourself to other elos of players and see how much vision they provide for their teams. The higher the elo, the more vision they have. Just keep farming and wait for your power spikes. Yumu's, Duskblade, even if you're behind on Rengar, as long as you have these items, they will still allow you to one combo squishy AD carries very easily. Now, what do you do as Rengar in the late game? Whether you're ahead or behind, Rengar generally has a pretty tough time in the late game. Assuming that your enemies are not completely stupid and actually go ahead and group up, in 5v5 situations, any assassin has a tough time to get through the backline. Rengar is not meant for team fighting. He is meant for single target assassinations. He is meant to blow up squishies. Let's say, for example, the enemy team has a lot of tanky champions and a lot of CC and a lot of peel for their AD carry. What should you be doing as Rengar at this point? What you should be doing is you should be trying to split push. When the enemy team starts to group as 5, tell your own team to stall, clear waves, and to not engage. And then go ahead and split push. Now, split pushing on Rengar does not necessarily have the same objectives as split pushing on something like a Tryndamere, where your only goal is to simply just take stuff and take objective. When you split push as Rengar, you're trying to split up the enemy team. Again, Rengar's job is single target assassinations. If they're grouped up as 5, you can't assassinate anyone. But if you're split pushing and you're causing them to split up and send someone to deal with you individually, then you can use your ultimate and your Yumu speed up to go back into the 4v4 and engage a 5v4. This is how you can make use out of Rengar's ultimate in the late game. Now, let's suppose that you have to have a team fight, that you need to have a team fight, or that someone got caught, or your team engaged. If you have to have a team fight as Rengar, try to have one in the jungle bushes near mid. The amount of bushes in this area give Rengar a lot of mobility to play with. This allows him to constantly get more and more ferocity stacks. Good team fighting on Rengar is all about what crowd control you can track on the enemy team. Have they used their stuns yet? Have they used their snares yet? Have they used their shields yet? Have they used their exhaust? What do they still have that could possibly stop you, the Rengar? If you can identify and track exactly which abilities will completely shut you down, once the enemy team actually uses those, that's the only time that you really want to go in. Rengar builds full damage. He does not have any real form of tankiness. So if you get caught, a lot of times once you go in, you're just dead or you're useless for the rest of the team fight. You only have one shot to make it count, so you have to make sure that you do the most with it. So, with all this in mind, what is the difference between a good Rengar and a bad Rengar? Once you master your full combo, Rengar comes down mostly to decision making, choosing the right targets, choosing the right empowered abilities, and being at the right place at the right time, whether it's split pushing, team fighting, or getting picks. Keeping good vision control over the enemy jungler and tracking them down will allow you to get more picks, will allow you to get better counter ganks, and ensures that your own team doesn't fall behind when you're farming. Learning the limits of your damage and exactly how much you can burst someone out for is extremely important on Rengar. Being able to track the enemy team comp's crowd control and how much of it is critical to how successful you're going to be in team fights. Remember, the most important thing as a Rengar player is to not get greedy. When you get ahead on Rengar, you feel incredible. You feel you're on top of the world because you just insta-killed someone and they couldn't do anything about it. You feel dominant and oppressive like a monster. But remember that Rengar is all about momentum. Even if you die once, it gives hope to the enemy team that you're not really that good and that they're not going to be as oppressed. You need to be a dictator and not show any weakness in your strengths. Rengar might feel like a savage hunter, but he's actually a calculated assassin. Be patient with your ganks. Be patient with your ultimate. Choose the right targets, path efficiently, and farm well. Rengar is a classic champion and a great carry jungler to take the time and master. For runes, go Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Zombie Ward, and Restless Hunter. Rengar's a burst champion, so obviously Electrocute and Restless Hunter are the best picks for him. Then go into the Inspiration Tree, taking Futures Market for early Tiamat buy, and Cosmic Insight for more ultimate activations. Another option for your secondary tree is instead of going into the early Tiamat buy, you can go into the Sorcery Tree, taking Water Walking and Celerity for more movement speed around the jungle. Here's your build. Start Hunter's Machete with Refillable Potion, then go Tiamat, Boots, then Caulfield's Warhammer into Duskblade. Even though Duskblade got nerfed, Duskblade is still the best single item for assassins and 1v1ing. If you're feeling risky, you can go into Mobility Boots. If the enemy team has a lot of auto attackers, go Ninja Tabbies instead. Go into Ghostblade for the lethality and movement speed. Edge of Night, finish up your warrior enchantment with Red Smite at around 30 minutes, ending with a Ravenous Hydra. Some alternatives to this is you can rush your jungle item first if you're being invaded a lot and need Red Smite to duel an enemy jungler. Upgrading to Titanic Hydra if you need some bulk, or even selling Tiamat late game and buying a GA if you're team fighting more than split pushing.